Why did I make that noise? Why am I talking about myself in third person? I tried to watch it when it was first out and I couldn't get past episode 1. Obviously, I was a far more delicate flower back in the day, but when Ria's daughter falls into it, really not a good day in the neighborhood. Hi everybody, it's Audrey and welcome back to Chapter and Converse. Today's video is going to be the second part of my February reading wrap-up. So if you didn't see part 1, I will link it for you and you can get into like a deeper dive of what I thought of all the books that I read on the first part of the month. And today we're gonna do a deep dive on the second part of the month. So let's just get into it. Wow. So super quick, I read The Sunken Motel by Simone St. James. This is one of my 5-star predictions and I will give you my full feelings on it in that video when we wrap it up in April. But long story short, I totally loved it. For Simone St. James, I've already picked up The Broken Girls. This is ghost vibes, this is mystery, this is dual POV, mystery in the past, mystery in the present, and an extended cast of characters of the most kick-ass, amazing ladies almost ever. Loved it. I listened to Pride by E.B. Savoy. This is a retelling of Pride and Prejudice and did not love it as much. This was kind of a solid 3 stars for me. I really struggled with Zuri, the main character. I found her extremely frustrating when she was dealing with Darius Darcy, who is our, obviously, Mr. Darcy character. And I'm not an Austen Pride and Prejudice person, so I 100% think I missed 100% of the references because obviously I'm not super familiar with that book. But I really enjoyed Zuri and her family and how she was with them. But she was so frustrating to me with Darius. And it just was, it was a roadblock for me to like really love this book. But the audiobook is narrated by Elizabeth Acevedo, so it is on point. So I love Darius, I love Zuri with her family, I just didn't like Zuri and Darius together. The next book I read is Taylor Jenkins Reid, After I Do. This was my last Taylor Jenkins Reid standing, and this was when I was palate cleansing. I could not find a book that I was connecting with, and I went the contemporary route, which is obviously not my go-to these days, and I loved it. I absolutely loved it. This was another book with an outstanding cast of amazing female characters. It's multi-generational. It's just everything Taylor Jenkins Reid does perfectly. It is all the emotions, all the feels, and it's just a twist on a story. And it's this married couple who has kind of fallen out of love with each other, and they don't want to get divorced, but they decide to take a year apart from each other where they can't talk, they can't see each other, they can't communicate in any way, and they just live their lives with the hope that they will find their way back to each other. And this is what happens during that year. So good. And then I listened to The Hate You Give by Angie Thomas. And I had already seen the movie of this. And if you haven't done either, read the book, then watch the movie. So I will say the movie did a really good job of capturing so much of what's in the book, but as always, you get so much more from the book. So there are characters who are blended together in the movie that you get full character in the book, and Star's relationship with her Uncle Carlos is so much more explained, and even her relationship with her dad. And Concrete Rose came out, which is the prequel to this, which is Maverick's story, and I really wanted to read The Hate You Give before I read Concrete Rose, just to A, get back into the mindset of it, and also I suspected that the book was going to have more to the story, and I really enjoyed it. It's really well done. I listened to the audiobook, which I also thought was great, and it just was a really good experience. So for part 2 of the month, the first book I read is one that you guys picked for me. And I did a video, which I will link for you if you haven't seen that one and are curious about it. But I have a whole bunch of books on my shelf, shocker, shocker, by authors who I've never read before, because I'm crazy like that. And I had you guys vote on which book I should read, and you guys picked Verity by Colleen Hoover, and I read it, and I loved it. And I'm so glad I read it. And this was one of those books that I was hearing so much hype about. And I feel like this is like a trend where I'm like, I had to have it and I didn't read it. But I just completely, compulsively gobbled this book up. And this is definitely going to fall into a theme for almost every book I read in the second half of the month, which is dark and messed up people doing dark and messed up things. So this is a book about a woman named Lowen, and she is a struggling writer. The stars align, and she gets this opportunity to co-write 3 books with this best-selling super famous, super rich, super well-known author, Verity Crawford. And it turns out that Verity has had an accident and she can't finish the books on her own, so she needs some help. So Lowen accepts the offer and she has to go up to Verity's estate, secluded sort of mansion-y estate, and kind of go through her notes, gather her stuff so she can write the books. And Verity lives at her estate with her husband Jeremy and their young son. So Lowen goes up, she's just gonna spend the weekend, get some notes, get on out of there. And while she's in Verity's office, she discovers a manuscript, which is kind of an autobiography, which is kind of a tell-all about Verity and its secrets, and it's just all sorts of messed up stuff. And Lowen is like, what do I do? Like, oh my God, I've just found like her deathbed confessional here. What do I do? Do I tell her husband? Do I keep it to myself? And as she's reading it, she's like completely freaked out, but she can't stop reading it. And this book is about what happens when that happens. So this is actually a book within a book, which I didn't realize until I got into it. And I can't even tell you that moment when I flipped the page and I was like, what? It's a book within a book? Why did nobody tell me that? Like, I would have picked it up sooner. But I totally devoured this. So yeah, I have not read any Colleen Hoover, obviously. My understanding, so I know that she self-published this, and from what I understand from Colleen Hoover readers, she definitely goes to much more messed up places in this than she does in her regular books, but you guys know me, I was here for it. So this is, I would say, I talked about this in the first half of February because I had started to read it, and I got a lot of comments, people who really struggle with the ending, and I get it. So I would say, with not giving anything away obviously, but my reading experience with this book, I would liken it to Behind Her Eyes by Sarah Pinborough, because I feel like that was one of those books where like some people loved it, some people didn't love it. For a lot of people, the ending either like made it or broke it for them. I was totally fine with the ending of that. I read that super late in the game too. And I felt very mumuch the same about this. Like I was here for it. Gobbled up the book, gobbled up the ending. I was totally okay with it. And I can't wait to read more Colleen Hoover. And I do have some feelings about the ending that I would have done differently, not because I didn't like it, but I sort of had a thought of where it was going and I wound up being wrong, which is totally fine. And I write about it in my Goodreads review, and it's marked as spoilers, so if you want to check that out, totally go for it. But not that I would change a thing, but I sort of had this thread. I was like, ooh, what if it does this? And it didn't, but I was like, ooh, but it did that instead. But loved it. So because I was loving the dark and messed up mode, I wanted to pick up another dark and messed up book. And I picked up Good Neighbors by Sarah Langan. And this is the first book I've read by her. This is her fourth book, I want to say. And she typically is a horror writer. And this is not a horror book in the sense that there are monsters involved, but the monsters are the people in the neighborhood. And I was listening to a podcast with her before I read the book, and she was saying how when she originally was writing this book, she had monsters in it, but like it just wasn't working. And she realized she didn't need sort of a mythical horror monster because the neighbors were monsters all in and of themselves. So this is a book that takes place in Long Island, and it takes place in the near future in 2027. And this follows a group of neighbors who live out on Maple Street. And Maple Street is sort of this idyllic suburban street with all these families and happy families and their beautiful children and playing in the park and everybody's friends and life is grand. And this family known as, their name are the Wilds. So it is Arlo and Gertie are the parents, and they are moving into the neighborhood from Brooklyn, and they basically want to have a better life for their children, and they are 100% the outsiders. So Gertie is like a former pageant queen, and she's all like boobs and hair and big earrings and like all the glam. And Arlo, her husband, is a former rock star, and he's all tattoos and track marks from his former drug addiction. And their children are perfectly fine children, but they are definitely the family that doesn't fit in. And the rest of the neighborhood kind of gives them a lot of side eye. But then Queen Bee of the neighborhood, Rhea, welcomes them in. And she befriends Gertie, and she sort of makes her acceptable, if you will. And they become fast friends. And then one night, Rhea and Gertie are drinking some wine and hanging out on the porch and swapping stories, and secrets are told, and a little bit too much is revealed, and it winds up causing a rift between the two women. And Rhea takes her Queen Bee role and basically starts spreading rumors about the Wilde family and turns the entire neighborhood against them. And this is all setup that happens before our book even opens. So when the book opens, the Wildes are kind of on the outs, and they're not quite sure why. And in 2027, global warming is causing sinkholes everywhere. Bear with me. And a giant sinkhole opens in Sterling Park, which is the park that's across the street from where everybody lives. And sinkholes, obviously, not good on a regular day, but when Rhea's daughter falls into it, really not a good day in the neighborhood. And Rhea winds up blaming the Wilde family for what happens to her daughter and really turns the town against them. And this is mob mentality and how people just follow the pack and believing the stories and not truly investigating anything, but just sort of how one little whisper and one little buzz and sort of one well-planted story can just take off and change everything. And this book, I read it in a weekend. I just loved her writing. I just loved how dark and messed up these people were. And I think the frightening part was you could imagine it happening anywhere. Again, with just sort of that well-placed whisper and how it catches wildfire and how the game of telephone can get played and the ripple effect that it has on everyone in this neighborhood. So I completely loved this. I can't wait to read more of her books. Again, her original, or I shouldn't say her original, her first 3 books were horror. I'm 100% going to start with the one, Audrey's Door, for obvious reasons. But I really enjoyed this. And if you guys are like me and really enjoy sort of the story behind the story and hearing the authors talk about it, Sarah Langan did a talk on Barnes & Noble's Facebook page. I will link it down below. It doesn't matter when it happened because at this point it's already done. But she was interviewed by Gillian Flynn, and that was the first time they met. And, you know, they were doing it over Zoom. But to see them kind of fangirl a little bit over each other and have such high praise and respect for each other, and then also talk about their process and talk about the stories, was just so fascinating to me, and I just loved every bit of it. So if you're interested, I will link it. But I really enjoyed this book. I wouldn't call it thriller, like it's not that fast-paced, boo in the dark kind of, you know, are we going to get out alive, isolated sort of a feel, but it is a very dark look at what can happen, like I said, with just sort of how one incident can really change everything, and the followers and that mob mentality feeling, and just how easily things can turn and how easily people can turn on one another. So highly recommend it. Totally enjoyed it. The next book I listened to is, like, because I listened to it, is A Man Called Uve by Frederick Bachman. I don't know why I said like the next book I listened to, because I read the other ones. But I did the audiobook of this. I read a little bit of it, but people had told me to do the audio, and I'm so glad I did because it was so well done. And I really think I got a much better appreciation and understanding of Uve through the audio. And he is your grumpy, crotchety old man who lives next door that everybody thinks they have all figured out and everybody thinks they know. And he, like in the opening pages of the book, so this is also like small neighborhood, small houses together, not thrillery, dark, messed up at all like Good Neighbors is, but it is that neighborhood relationship. And every morning he starts out and he's like checking to see, you know, if everyone's trash was taken out the correct way, and coming to people who are like, you can't put your bike there, and you can't drive on the street, and you can't do this, and you can't do that. He's the rules guy, and he holds everyone accountable, and he comes for you if you're not following the rules of the road, literally. And he's just not happy. He's just not a happy man. And everyone else kind of rolls their eyes at him to a degree, I would say. But then a new family moves in next door and they kind of maybe back their moving truck over his mailbox, which you can imagine how much that makes him happy. But this is very much the story about how that family, so it's a husband and wife and their 2 children, really sort of accidentally insert themselves into his life over and over again. And it's everything from the husband needing to borrow a ladder, and the wife who is pregnant and doesn't know how to drive, needs a ride to the hospital, and they keep coming to him and needing things from him. And he helps them and like begrudgingly is sort of like, fine, fine, fine. But it's the development of this relationship and how through that we get to see Uve for who he really is. And we also see sort of a past timeline, and we start to understand his background, and we understand what he's been through, and we understand how he got to the point that he's at in his life. And I have read the Beartown series, the only Bachman I've read, and everyone warned me this is nothing like that, and they're right, it's nothing like that. But what is like that is his writing, which is just so incredible and so beautiful. And there's a lot of just wonderful passages and turns of phrases, and just Frederick Bachman is such an incredibly gifted writer and has such a skill for making me cry and making me laugh and like frustrating me sometimes, but really paints a beautiful, and like not frustrated like I'm frustrated with his book, but like his characters can frustrate me, like all the feels kind of come out of it. And he just crafts such beautiful characters. And it's just, I mean, it's not Beartown. I loved Beartown. But I really was eager to read this book. I'm being very cautious because what I didn't say is this was one of my 5-star predictions. So I'm not going to give you my full-on feelings until April when I do that video. But this was one of those. I read it. I highly recommend the audiobook if you are going to give it a go. And there's a beautiful passage towards the end of it that's just sort of a reflective passage about life in general. And did that make this girl cry. And then I ended the month with such a bang, you guys, and I can't believe I didn't read this book sooner. This is what happens when you pick up books off your shelf. This is They Never Learn by Lynn Fargo. And again, I was in the dark and messed up place and I wanted to stay there because it's my happy place. And this is like all that and more. This is dark academia, and I picked this up last year when it came out, and you know, I did the thing. Had to have it, put it on the shelf, didn't touch it again. But I am trying very hard to read books off my shelf, and I'm so glad I picked this up. So this is about an English professor named Scarlett Clark, and she works at Gorman University. And she is talented, and she's successful, and she's all the things. And she also maybe perhaps is 100% a serial killer. She just is. But she is Dexter in that she only kills the bad guys. So she's basically doing a public service. And she's been doing it for years, and she's been getting away with it all this time. But then somebody new was kind of on the scene at school, the university, and they're kind of wondering why all these people keep dying. So Scarlett inserts herself into the investigation to make sure she doesn't get caught, but also she's already kind of got her next victim and her next murder planned, and she kind of would like to go through with it. So we follow Scarlett through all of this, and then we also follow Carly, who is a freshman at Gorman, and Carly is basically just like so happy to be away from her parents, but she's kind of quiet and shy and introverted and has had like a little bit of a sheltered upbringing. And she winds up becoming roommates with this girl, Ashley, who is a sophomore. And Ashley is all the things. She's outgoing and she's free and she's kind of wild and she's an actress and she's got this great group of friends, and she just kind of takes Carly under her wing, and they become really close friends, really fast friends like you are apt to do in college. And one night at a party, Ashley winds up getting sexually assaulted, and Carly is just obsessed with punishing the person who assaulted her and coming for this person. And she just starts to have sort of these messed up, twisted fantasies about getting revenge. So this book touched every dark part of my soul, and I loved it. And I also just compulsively read this. I loved the writing, I loved the characters, I loved the twists and turns. It just was everything like I didn't even know I needed. And like I was reading it and I was like, oh my God, yes, yes. And of course I did the thing where I started listening to more podcasts and doing everything else. So I totally loved this. This was not, I don't even know how it came on my radar in the first place and then how it fell off of it, but I am so glad I picked this up. I totally enjoyed it. If you are looking for dark and messed up things that happen in a college with dual POVs and a Dexter-ish type of lady, go for it, because this book was great. And I feel like I maybe told you guys in a video or maybe not, I am just watching Dexter for the first time now. I know. I tried to watch it when it was first out and I couldn't get past episode 1. Obviously I was a far more delicate flower back in the day, even though I was reading still dark and messed up stuff. But I didn't get past episode 1 and now I am into season 2 and I'm trying to just patiently, or not even patiently, I'm trying to pace myself. But I'm just loving it, and I've always loved Michael C. Hall. But the fact that this is like, has the Dexter vibes to it, completely has me jazzed, so I loved it. So that's gonna do it for the month of February. I am so happy. You guys know I started out strong, hit a bump, but I finished with such a high note. And right now I'm reading The Push by Ashley Audrain, also staying in the dark and messed up place. So I will reserve my opinion until I get to the end of it. But so far, like, dark, messed up. It's all the things people are saying it is. Like, it's twisted and yeah. I hesitate to say anything yet, but I'm reading it, I'm in it. So wait until March's review comes out, because it's March when you're watching this, but I'll let you guys know what I think. But let me know about your best read of February. Let me know if you had a slump. Let me know whatever you want to let me know down below, and we will talk there, and I will see you guys in the next video. Bye, everybody.